We now begin the study of Luke. Luke was written for a Gentile audience. Matthew was written for a Jewish audience, and Mark for a Roman audience. Matthew presented Jesus Christ as the rejected but ultimately reigning king. Mark presented Jesus Christ as the servant, the powerful servant, who gives his life as a ransom for many. The Gospel of Luke provides an orderly account of the life and ministry of Jesus Christ for a Gentile readership in order to certify that Jesus was the promised Messiah for Israel, and indeed the Son of God who became the Son of Man, in order to provide the way for the Gentiles to enter the kingdom as well as Israel. Our first session in Luke takes us from chapters 1 all the way through chapter 4. In chapter 1 to 4, we have the prologue, which gives us the purpose of Luke's gospel. In chapter 1:5 through 4:13, we have the pre-public life of Jesus, that aspect that chronicles what life was like in the beginning before he became famous. In chapter 1 to 4, we have the purpose statement of Luke's gospel. Listen as I read it. Luke begins, "Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word have handed them down to us, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus." In this purpose statement, Luke tells us two major things. One, that he did his homework, and therefore there was authenticity to his accounts. Eyewitnesses, previously written records, these are the sources that God the Holy Spirit guided Luke, the human author, to use in the recording of this great book. The French skeptic Renan, though not believing in Jesus and believing in God, said that Luke is one of the greatest pieces of literature he had ever read. In the second aspect of this prologue, we find that Luke is saying that his purpose was for certainty, to give certainty to a man by the name of Theophilus, whose name, interestingly enough, means a friend of God. Some have said that this book is for anyone who's enough of a friend of God to read it. But Theophilus needed assurance for his faith in Jesus Christ. The pre-public life of Jesus is recorded in chapter 1, verse 5 through chapter 4, verse 13. In our purpose statement, we read from Luke that his purpose was to give an orderly account. And that's exactly what he does. In these first 4 chapters, there are 3 cycles of material, 3 cycles that go through the announcements of the birth of John and then Jesus, the birth records of John and Jesus, and the ministry of John and Jesus. In the announcements of John's birth, John was predicted to be a prophet of the Most High. Jesus would be the Son of the Most High. In the birth record, John was born of a miraculous provision of God between Zacharias and Elizabeth, those who were barren and not able to bear children. In their old age, God gave the miraculous ability. God gave the miraculous ability for Elizabeth to get pregnant and give birth to John. His birth was miraculous, but Jesus' birth was more miraculous. It was without a man. It was the virgin birth of the very Son of God who became the Son of Man. The ministry records highlight John's role as forerunner and Jesus' role as the Messiah. There are 3 purposes to this pre-public life. One is to show the superiority of Jesus over John. John was great, but Jesus is greater. John was the prophet, but Jesus is Lord. Secondly, it was to link through the Old Testament prophecies that are recorded in these first 4 chapters that Jesus in his ministry would fulfill all of those Old Testament predictions. So it looks back to the Old Testament, but it gives us a preview of the life and ministry that Jesus would fulfill as the Son of God who became the Son of Man. And thirdly, it documents for us the preparatory work of the forerunner, John the Baptist, who precedes and makes the way ready for Jesus as the Messiah to come. This section of pre-public life shows us that Jesus Christ indeed is the Son of God, who became the Son of Man, so that he might die to give life. Luke's gospel has a key verse. In chapter 19 and verse 10, it says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost." That's what we're going to see as the theme of this great book of Luke.